It is first and goal from the 2. He was knocked out of bounds. Jones scores on the first play.
This touchdown run from 2 yards out was scored by James Jones. To say that this was a big touchdown would be putting it lightly. Here, it had a battle between the Dallas Cowboys and the Detroit Lions, two teams coming off of a Week 1 victory, with the winner of the game going to 2-0. Historically, you're in a pretty good spot if you start the season off with a 2-0 record. Of the 3 teams in the NFC to start 2-0 in 1984, all 3 of them made the playoffs, with those 3 teams being the Giants, the Bears, and the Super Bowl champion 49ers. The same thing applied in 1983, with both NFC teams and all 5 NFL teams making the playoffs after a 2-0 start, and in 1982, when all 3 NFC teams made the playoffs that started 2-0. And the touchdown by James Jones? Well, it put the Lions up 26-0. No one saw this coming. The Cowboys were 5-point favorites and were expected to be better than the Lions, especially seeing as the Lions only won 4 games the year before and barely scraped by one of the worst teams in football, the Atlanta Falcons, in Week 1. Yet, to go up 26-0 in the third quarter? At that time, and even today, no team that led by 26 points after the third quarter went on to lose the game. So to say the Lions were in a really good spot after this touchdown by Jones would be putting it lightly. This was the moment that the game got out of hand. This was the moment that the Lions, barring a complete and utter choke job, would go with 2-0 for the first time since 1982, and would surprise just about everyone in the first year under new head coach Darryl Rodgers. So why do I bring this touchdown up? Because this touchdown never should have happened. This touchdown was marred in controversy and led a lot of people to cry foul that James Jones, this man right here, was even in the game in the first place. Before I get to why that was the case, make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing and for hyping up this video. And with that in mind, let's talk about this man, that play, and how the Lions may have roared over the line to win this game. But before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand just who this man right here, James Jones, is, and how good of a running back he was for the Lions. The Lions drafted him in the first round of the 1983 NFL Draft with the 13th pick, making him the 4th running back off the board. For some perspective, the next 2 running backs off the board were Gary Anderson, a Pro Bowler in 1986, and a man who had over 6,400 yards from scrimmage in his illustrious career that included 3 seasons with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, and Roger Craig, one of the anchors of the San Francisco 49ers dynasty throughout the 1980s, and a man who should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. However, despite the good backs taken after Jones that might have been better, that's not to say that Jones was a bad player by any means. In fact, Jones himself had 3 seasons with over 1,100 yards from scrimmage, including the 1985 season that's the subject of this video. And Jones was an instrumental part of the few wins that the Lions had in 1984. When Jones had at least 32 yards rushing, the Lions went 3-3-1. When he did not reach that mark, the Lions went 1-7. Pretty big difference from a 500 team to a team that's on pace to be the worst in football, if you ask me. And the previous week, in Week 1 against the Atlanta Falcons, in that 28-27 win, Jones had arguably his best game ever as a pro. The Lions fed him the ball 10 times on the ground, and he picked up 75 yards on 7.5 yards per carry. He also contributed in the passing game, catching 3 passes for 50 yards. Not only did Jones lead the team in rushing yards, but he was about the only player to have success on the ground. The Lions ran the ball 23 times without Jones, and on those 23 carries, the Lions accumulated just 55 yards, or 2.3 yards per carry. Jones was averaging 7.5 yards per carry. Jones also led the team in receptions, being one of just 2 players on the team to catch at least 3 passes, and he scored the first and final points of the game for Detroit, scoring the first touchdown that put them on the board to come back from a 14-0 deficit, and scoring the final touchdown in the third quarter from 21 yards out that gave them their first lead of the game. This is all to say that getting James Jones involved and getting the Florida man involved was an instrumental part in how the Lions would have any sort of success, because it seemed like after a solid 1984 campaign, the man was picking up right where he left off heading into 1985, even despite a new coach calling the shots. However, there was one small problem after that Falcons game, and that was the fact that Jones was nursing a pretty nasty injury to his thigh. Jones was initially listed as having a sore toe, leaving him to skip a practice. But the bigger concern was the thigh bruise that he picked up at some point during that Falcons game and was not getting any better. It seemed like the Lions were going to be playing that Week 2 contest against the Cowboys without Jones in the backfield, meaning that against the #1 rushing defense in football the previous year in terms of rushing touchdowns allowed, and against the defense that won the previous week against Washington on Monday Night Football and forced 7 turnovers, they wouldn't have arguably their top offensive option. And this led the Lions to list him on the injury report as doubtful. Now today, the doubtful designation does not exist. Today, a player is either playing, is out, or is questionable, and there's no in between. However, back in 1985, and even a couple of years ago, you had more options to designate a player as. You still have a questionable designation, which indicates there's a 50-50 shot that he can go. The full designation, which indicates that he's going to play, and the out designation, which indicates that he's not going to play. But you also had the probable designation and the doubtful designation. And if a player is listed as doubtful, it was basically treated the same way as ruling a guy out. You could count on the fact that if a player was doubtful, he wasn't playing on Sunday. In fact, not only was Jones listed as doubtful, but he flat out told everyone that he wasn't going to be playing in the game. When he arrived to the Silverdome at 9 a.m. and met with team trainer Ken Falb, he said that he wasn't going to be able to go. And it was so unlikely that he was going to play that in the press box, an announcement was made before the game started by officials that James Jones would not be playing because of the injury. So you have the Lions saying that Jones wasn't going to play, Jones himself saying that he wasn't going to play, and officials in the press box saying that he wasn't going to play. In other words, you would expect that when it came to this man right here, that the Cowboys would have nothing to worry about because he wasn't going to play. And yet, sure enough,
it is first and goal from the 2. He was knocked out of bounds. Jones scores on the first play.
Yeah, remember that play? That was him. He also had another huge catch in the first half that went for 26 yards that got the Lions into plus territory and gave the Lions 3 critical points. It wasn't the first time that we saw a game between the Lions and the Cowboys marred with controversy on the part of the Lions bending the rules a little bit in order to get an advantage over Dallas. The last time the teams met in 1981, the Lions won on a last-second field goal by Eddie Murray, where the Lions clearly had 12 men on the field and should have been penalized accordingly for it, with Commissioner Pete Rozelle even admitting and joking afterwards that the Lions got a huge break there because it was very clearly an illegal kick for having too many men on the field. And now, the Cowboys get hosed again? You can count on one hand the number of times a player has been ruled doubtful to play, only to wind up playing in the game. And now for this to happen, and for this man to have some incredible plays against you and score the touchdown that officially put the game out of reach after he was pretty much ruled out, seems like that shouldn't be allowed. Now, to be fair to Jones, as in the man you're watching highlights of right now, After the man was basically ruled out for the game by every source, he had a pretty good reason as to why things changed, saying, "I just had to get past that cold point where it starts to tighten up." In other words, he didn't think he could go, but he gave it a try in pregame warmups, and once he got past that initial hurdle of dealing with the pain, he was good to go. And throughout all of this, it's tough to blame this man right here, James Jones. He was an innocent bystander in all this. He seemed like it, at least. Football players are going to want to play football. It's not rocket science. Football players are warriors, and they'll try pushing through anything in order to be on the field and help their team win the game, if at all possible. But when it came to the Lions reporting this, yeah, this feels incredibly dirty. It feels wrong that the Cowboys went into the week thinking that there was no way that Jones was going to be able to play because the Lions listed him as doubtful, and the Lions even announced in the press box before the game that Jones wasn't playing because of the injury, only for him to just magically show up and torch the Cowboys when it mattered most. They were not preparing for Jones through no fault of their own, and they ended up facing Jones. That seems a bit wrong, but then again, it wouldn't be a Lions-Cowboys game without a little bit of controversy. Jones ended up having a very good 1985 season, even despite the thigh bruise that still lingered and kept him out for some time the following 2 weeks. And for what it's worth, the Lions did not get punished for this. Despite what was a clear circumvention of the injury report and a withholding of information, even to the point where the team literally announced that Jones would not be playing, putting the Cowboys and bettors at a severe disadvantage, the Lions were off the hook, although I strongly doubt that they get a similar fate if this happened 40 years later in 2025. You can sound off in the comments whether or not you think the Lions deserve punishment for announcing this and listing him as doubtful, only to do a 180 at the last minute. Whatever the case, Jones, the FI and all, was able to do the job for the Lions on this September day in 1985. Because during week 2 of the 1985 season, the Cowboys' chances at erasing a 26-point deficit after 3 quarters were the same as James Jones' designation on the injury report: doubtful. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.